Stand on the coast of Sicily today, and you're floating on top of a crime scene. Roughly 5.6 million years ago, there was no water here at all. The Mediterranean was a canyon, 3 to 5 kilometers deep, floored wall-to-wall in salt, dry enough to walk from Spain to Africa without getting your boots wet. An entire sea just switched off, and the only witnesses left behind never said a word. They just got buried. No one was around to see the sea vanish, so in 1970, a crew of geologists went and asked the seafloor itself. Aboard the drill ship Glomar Challenger, Bill Ryan and Kenneth Shue punched nearly 2 miles into the Mediterranean floor and pulled up gypsum, rock salt, and mud cracked by sun that hadn't touched it in millions of years. Ryan was the expedition's co-chief scientist, the man who had to sign off on what the ship brought up. He'd spent his career studying ordinary seafloor sediment. Nothing in his training had prepared him for a core that looked like it belonged in a desert quarry. Rock like that has no business sitting under an ocean, which raised an awkward question nobody on that ship could yet answer. A century before anyone drilled anything, a Swiss geologist named Carl Meyer Eimar was already staring at the answer and didn't know it. In 1867, Swiss paleontologist Carl Meyer Eimar found fossils embedded in gypsum-bearing sediment layers near the Sicilian town of Messina, dated them to the twilight of the Miocene, and named the whole epoch after the place. He'd found the crime scene's paperwork. He just had no idea there'd been a body. Nearly a century after Meyer Eimar filed that paperwork, someone finally looked underneath it. In 1961, ships bouncing sound waves off the Mediterranean seabed picked up something strange. A flat, uniform layer, buried the length of a couple football fields down, tracing the shape of the modern floor with eerie precision. Not lumpy, not scattered, laid down evenly, everywhere, all at once. Whatever did that wasn't drifting sediment. It was an event. And that ship in 1970 finally opened the evidence itself. Inside those cores sat deep-sea ooze that had dried into dust and drifted across the seabed on the wind, mixed with quartz sand blown in from nearby land, sandwiched between layers of pure halite. Sandstorms on the floor of an ocean. There was no longer any room to argue. This basin hadn't just lost some water, it had been open air. Every crime needs a motive, and this one starts at the door. About 5.96 million years ago, the ancestral Strait of Gibraltar sealed itself shut. The one gap connecting the Mediterranean to the Atlantic closed. No inflow, no outflow, no relief. The Mediterranean was suddenly on its own, cut off from the only ocean big enough to keep it alive, and in a climate this dry, that's not an inconvenience. That's a death sentence with a 1,000-year clock already running. And that clock ran fast. With no Atlantic feeding it, the basin was bleeding water to the sky every single year. Gone, evaporated, never coming back. One sea died so the rest of the planet's oceans could rise. Do the arithmetic, and it isn't even close. The basin held something like 3.7 million cubic kilometers of seawater. Lose 300 of those every year, and you've drained the whole thing in scarcely more than a millennium. A geological eye blink for a body of water that size. Open air didn't mean empty, though. What survived down there curdled into brine pools thick enough to pickle anything unlucky enough to fall in. As concentrated as the Dead Sea, and just as forgiving. Underneath them, the evaporation left a crust of salt tens of meters deep, a floor built entirely out of everything the sea used to be. And the canyon holding that crust wasn't shallow. At its deepest, the empty basin dropped nearly 4 kilometers below where the sea used to sit, a hole big enough to swallow a small mountain range and still have room to spare. Then, improbably, the sky changed its mind. Around 5.5 million years ago, the climate turned wetter, and rivers began pouring back into the wound, diluting those brine pools into broad, brackish lakes, something closer to today's Caspian than the Dead Sea. The desert seemed to be healing itself, except nothing about this basin was finished changing yet. None of it held. Around 533 million years ago, the Strait of Gibraltar didn't just reopen, it failed catastrophically, like a dam wall giving out all at once. The Atlantic didn't trickle back in through some gentle new channel. It found a weak point, and it came through like the ocean had been waiting behind a door with its shoulder against the wood. Researchers modeling the breach put the inflow at something close to 1,000 times the discharge of the Amazon River, which is not a river refilling a basin. That's an ocean losing its patience. A breach that size doesn't just fill a hole, it reshapes the whole. That inflow is thought to have blasted its own canyon straight through the strait, chewing rock apart as it went, racing to answer a basin sitting kilometers below sea level with a debt long overdue. No river on Earth moves like that. No delta, no floodplain. Nothing in the ordinary hydrology of this planet could have kept pace with water. That impatient. The lake that had been healing itself never stood a chance. So the crime scene is closed, but the timestamp isn't. Nobody studying this breach doubts its size. That argument's over. What they can't settle is its clock. Feed the same flood into different models, and you get wildly different verdicts. Some clock it in weeks, others stretch it into years, and geology still won't pick a side. Weeks, months, years. Run the same breach through different equations, and the verdicts scatter all over the calendar, and the people running them aren't shy about disagreeing in print. Yet zoom out to the only clock that actually matters here, 6 million years of Earth history, and the argument evaporates. However long it lasted, the Mediterranean came back in a blink. The scar tissue is still there, if you know where to taste for it. Every year, evaporation still pulls Mediterranean water skyward faster than its rivers can replace it, and the Atlantic still has to lean in through Gibraltar to cover the difference. That habit is old, older than the flood that supposedly settled things, so today's Mediterranean carries a sliver more salt than the ocean next door. A small, permanent grudge held by water that once boiled itself down to brine and never quite forgot the taste. Put a number on the grudge and it's small but real. Mediterranean water runs roughly 15% saltier than the North Atlantic sitting right outside its door. 15%, 5 million years running, and nobody's ever paid it off. That grudge had a body count. For roughly 600,000 years, marine life adapted to increasingly concentrated brine as the Mediterranean's connection to the ocean narrowed, creating isolated pools of water too saline for most organisms to survive. Fish, mollusks, Entire reef communities pressed into shrinking poisoned puddles, generation after generation, with nowhere left to retreat to, nowhere to go. The flood that eventually came back wasn't a rescue. It arrived after the dying was already finished. The dying left a body, but the murder weapon is still in the room. That salt never went anywhere. It's still down there right now, tens of meters of it. Buried under the seafloor, every ferry and cruise ship crosses without a clue. It's not just a souvenir either. Geologists say that layer still flexes and shifts, still nudges how the whole Mediterranean basin settles and cracks today. Bury a body that size, and the crime scene doesn't stay closed forever. Africa is still sliding north into Europe, millimeters a year, patient in the way only tectonic plates can afford to be. Some researchers go further than a second drying. Keep that collision running long enough, they argue, and the squeeze doesn't just seal the strait. It could eventually erase the Mediterranean from the map entirely, folded into the mountain-building mess of Africa and Europe grinding together. Squeeze that gap at Gibraltar shut again, and geologists will tell you it's a when, not an if. And there's no reason to think the sea gets special treatment twice. Same dry climate on the other side of that door. Same 1,000-year clock, ready to start counting the moment somebody closes it. Which makes the water lapping at Sicily this afternoon a lot younger than it looks. That crime scene never fully closed. It's a thin, 5-million-year-old patch job laid directly over a desert that took its sweet time dying. The sea didn't heal. It got rebuilt, once catastrophically, by an ocean that lost patience with a locked door. Everything beneath your hull remembers being open air. And Gibraltar isn't the only door in Earth's history that slammed shut. The same drying, the same salt, the same abrupt silence has almost certainly happened to other seas, in other basins, on other continents, long before anyone was around to notice the water was gone. That evidence isn't lost. It's just buried under sea floors nobody's drilled yet, waiting for the next ship, the next core, the next crime scene to open.